"You have no right to be here," my mother hissed, grabbing my wrist in the hotel restroom. "Your father is about to announce a $2 million grant. Do not embarrass us again." I stared at our reflection in the mirror, a perfect snapshot of what 15 years apart looked like. Her in her $1,000 dress and perfect makeup. Me in my sensible black suit, clutching my Environmental Chemistry Innovation Award. The irony of this moment would have been funny if it weren't so painful. "Actually, Mother, I have every right," I replied, gently pulling my arm free. "I'm tonight's keynote speaker and award recipient. Didn't you read the program? Or were you too busy planning which society friends to network with?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but 15 years of buried hurt has a way of surfacing at the worst moments. The bathroom's bright lights highlighted every line of disapproval on my mother's face, every crease of disdain around her perfectly painted mouth. "This is exactly why your father and I had to distance ourselves," she said, her voice dropping to that familiar condescending whisper. "You've always been so difficult, so determined to embarrass the family name." I almost laughed. The family name. The precious Parker name that I'd been told I was tarnishing when I got a B+ in advanced chemistry. The same name that now appeared on scientific journals and university lecture halls. My mind flashed back to that rainy night in high school, when Dad threw my belongings onto the front lawn because I'd only been accepted to community college. "No daughter of mine will be such a disappointment," he'd shouted as I gathered my soaking wet clothes. Mother had watched from behind the curtains, silent as always, while I loaded everything I owned into my best friend Sarah's car. "Your father doesn't know you're the recipient," she said, reapplying her signature red lipstick with slightly shaking hands. "He thinks he's here to honor some brilliant Oxford graduate who's revolutionizing environmental chemistry." "Well, he's half right," I responded, smoothing down my jacket. "I did graduate from Oxford. Summa cum laude, actually. Then Cambridge offered me a teaching position. But you'd know all this if either of you had bothered to open any of the letters I sent over the years." The lipstick slipped from her fingers, clattering into the sink. For the first time tonight, her perfect mask cracked slightly. "Cambridge? You teach at Cambridge." "I'm a full professor there now," I said, reaching past her to wash my hands. "Leading a research team on sustainable chemistry solutions. The work your husband's company is about to fund with that $2 million grant? That's my project. My research. My team." The color drained from her face as the implications sank in. Richard Parker, the man who'd thrown me out for being a disappointment, was about to publicly fund his disowned daughter's groundbreaking research. In front of the entire scientific community and all his high society friends. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and evening gowns when I stepped out of the restroom. Mother had rushed off, probably to warn Dad, but I walked calmly to my assigned seat at the main table. Years of academic presentations had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure. Dr. Rachel Parker, a young event coordinator, approached me. "You're up in 5 minutes. Mr. Parker would like a word before your speech." Of course he would. I followed her to a small conference room off the main hall, where my father stood looking out the window. 15 years hadn't changed him much, except for the gray at his temples and new lines around his mouth. "You need to decline the award," he said without turning around. His voice was exactly as I remembered, cold and controlled. "I'll have them announce you're ill." "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady. 15 years, and that's what you lead with?" He finally turned, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? The board members, our friends, everyone will know." "Know what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That your daughter, who you threw out for being a disappointment, actually succeeded? That the community college student you were so ashamed of now holds 3 degrees and a professorship at Cambridge." "You're twisting things," he snapped. "We gave you every opportunity. Every opportunity." I cut in, my calm finally cracking. "You threw my clothes on the lawn because I got into community college instead of Yale. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school. I lived on ramen noodles and shared a tiny apartment with 4 other students. The only thing you gave me was the motivation to prove you wrong. The door opened and the event coordinator poked her head in. Dr. Parker? They're ready for you. Rachel, my father's voice held a warning note. If you do this, you'll what? I asked, straightening my jacket. Throw me out again? Cut me off financially? Been there, done that. The difference is, this time I'm not a scared 18-year-old. I'm Dr. Rachel Parker, and I'm about to accept an award for work that will help thousands of people. I walked to the podium with my head high, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. In the front row, Mother sat rigid, her fingers wrapped so tightly around her champagne glass that her knuckles were white. Dad had slipped into his seat beside her, his face a thundercloud. Good evening, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. I'm Dr. Rachel Parker, and I'm honored to accept the Environmental Chemistry Innovation Award for our work on sustainable water purification systems. The silence in the room was deafening as the connection dawned on people's faces. I could see the whispers starting, the subtle glances between my father's business associates. Richard Parker's composure finally cracked as he realized I wasn't backing down. Our team at Cambridge has developed a low-cost method to provide clean water to underserved communities. I continued, my voice growing stronger. This technology isn't just theoretical. It's already being implemented in rural areas where clean water access has been a generational struggle. I paused, making direct eye contact with my father. And this is why I'm announcing tonight that the entire $2 million grant will be used to establish the Second Chance Scholarship Fund. This fund will support students who, like me, start their journey at community colleges, proving that excellence can begin anywhere. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous level. In the crowd, I spotted Dr. Martinez, my first chemistry professor at Hartford Community College, who had believed in me when no one else did. She was wiping tears from her eyes. Success isn't about where you start, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's about perseverance, about getting back up when people tell you you're not good enough. Sometimes, the people who should believe in you the most are the ones who believe in you the least. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. But before he could leave, an elderly man at his table grabbed his arm. I recognized him as James Wilson, the chairman of the board. Sit down, Richard, I heard him say firmly. Your daughter is making us proud. As I stepped down from the podium, the room erupted in applause, but I noticed my father storming out through the side door, Mother trailing behind him. Several board members looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves. Dr. Parker, James Wilson approached me, his expression grave. I must say this is unexpected. Your father assured us he had personally vetted the grant recipient. Now I understand why he was so insistent on keeping the selection process private. He had no idea it was me, I said firmly. Neither of my parents knew anything about my life after they threw me out. They made that very clear tonight. Dr. Martinez appeared at my side, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Rachel was one of our brightest students at Hartford Community College, she told Wilson. She worked 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Everything she's achieved, she did entirely on her own. Wilson nodded slowly. Well, the grant contract is already signed. And given the impressive presentation of your work, I see no reason to reconsider the board's decision. Though I suspect Richard might not be joining us for the rest of the evening. Just then, Mother reappeared, her perfect composure finally cracking. How dare you humiliate us like this? She hissed, grabbing my arm. Your father is devastated. All these years, we thought you'd probably ended up working in some small-town lab. We never imagined you'd stoop to this level of public revenge. I carefully removed her hand. That's exactly the problem, Mother. You never imagined I could succeed without you. You never imagined I could be anything at all. You want to talk about humiliation? I kept my voice low but firm. Try explaining to your roommates why you're sleeping on their couch at 18. Try working the morning shift at a diner before classes, then retail until midnight, just to afford textbooks. Mother's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her throat. We had standards, expectations. You were throwing your life away at that community college. No, I was finding my way. But you couldn't see past your own prejudices. I glanced around at the crowded ballroom where people were still mingling, stealing glances our way. And now look where we are. Your precious standards versus my actual achievements. A small group of young students from the local community college approached nervously, programs and notepads in hand. They'd been invited as part of an outreach program. Mother automatically stepped back, as if their presence might somehow taint her designer dress. Dr. Parker. One girl spoke up, clutching her notebook. Your speech about starting at community college, it meant so much to us. Would you mind? Of course, I smiled, turning away from Mother. I'd love to talk with you all. In fact, let me tell you about the scholarship program we're setting up. As I spoke with the students, sharing my email and promising to help with their questions about transfer programs, I caught sight of Mother slipping out of the ballroom. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched in a way that would have horrified her etiquette coach. Dr. Martinez joined our group, adding her own warm encouragement to the students. You know, she said quietly to me during a pause, sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's simply living well and helping others do the same. Looking back at that night now, 6 months later, I realized Dr. Martinez was right. The real victory wasn't in the confrontation with my parents, but in what came after. The Second Chance Scholarship Fund has already helped 15 community college students transfer to four-year universities. Every time I read their application essays, I see myself in their words, their determination, their refusal to let circumstances define them. Dad resigned from his position as CEO 3 months after the ceremony, citing personal reasons. The board's investigation into his attempt to privately control the grant selection process probably didn't help. Mother still attends her charity luncheons, but according to former family friends who've reached out, she's quieter now, less quick to judge others. Last week, I received a thick envelope from their lawyer. Inside was a letter attempting to explain, to apologize, to make amends. Along with it came a check for what they called my inheritance. I donated it to the scholarship fund. Yesterday, one of our first scholarship recipients stopped by my office at Cambridge. She's studying environmental chemistry just like I did. Her eyes lit up as she described her research project, and I saw in her the same passion that had kept me going during those long nights of studying between shifts. Dr. Parker, she said before leaving, my parents didn't support my choices either. But your story showed me that sometimes the hardest path leads to exactly where you're meant to be. I smiled, thinking of that scared 18-year-old who'd watched her belongings get thrown onto a wet lawn. If only she could see how things would turn out, how every struggle would shape her into someone stronger, someone who could help others find their way. The $2 million grant is doing exactly what it should, changing lives. Just not in the way my father intended. And somehow that feels like the perfect ending to this chapter of my story.